Hi everybody, it's Trevor Yong here. This is the Trev Talks podcast. I'm really excited to be here with the CEO and co-founder of Polytag, Alice Rackley. Alice, how are you?
Oh, very well, thanks, Trevor. How are you?
I'm really good. We've just been talking in the green room about how it's Friday morning. We've got loads of stuff on, but we're going to treat this as a little holiday away from the working week, right? And we're going to
Yeah,
have fun
that's
with
it.
it. It's really great to catch up and actually just talk about things that aren't time pressured and exerting strain and stress, right? So yeah, really pleased to have you with us, Alice. And
Thanks for
of course,
having me.
yeah, our listeners and our viewers may not know you. So would you mind introducing yourself, who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the chat. My name's Alice. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Polytag, as you said. I've been leading the business now for 3 years, and prior to that, I'd spent my career working in the FMCG retail space, developing digital customer experiences for mainly large brands, and so it was quite a shock, not only to myself but my wider friends and family network when I announced that I was doing what subsequently become known as the double pivot. So I went from large corporate into startup, and I went from digital retail, into recycling. And over the last couple of years, as I've become more and more enthusiastic about this particular sector, the dinner party invites have dried up because now all I talk about is recycling, and it's not
I
everyone's
know
cup
the
of
pain.
tea.
I know the pain, Alice. What do you guys talk about at dinner? Yeah, packaging substrates. Yeah, and I'm just curious because how did you decide to come up with this idea? Where did it come from?
Well, the idea for Polytag was actually developed by two of my other co-founders. There's three of us, Phil and Brendan, who have worked their whole careers in problematic waste sectors, so dealing with used carpet and taking downcycled plastics and converting them into curb and drainage solutions and all of those sorts of very obscure and interesting pursuits. And they had identified that single use plastic in particular was mainly being downcycled, when in fact it has got good high value for the brands that originally create the plastic and put it onto the market. So if you take like a shampoo bottle, for example, might have a pearlescent finish, and it might be some particular master batch colour that is worth, I don't know, £800 a tonne to the brand that's using it. But as soon as it's gone through the recycling system and baled and then pelletized, it's actually only good for drain pipes, and is worth £100 a tonne. And
Hmm.
that just seemed ridiculous to Brendan and Phil, that the fact that you can devalue something after just one use in such an extreme fashion. And so they came up with the idea of Polytag, and being able to show brands what's happening to their material once it's been put in the bin. And then hopefully, once they're armed with that information, take steps to get it back. So that was the original idea of Polytag. How did I end up getting involved? It was just one of those chance meetings. I was actually working at the time for the standards agency, not a not-for-profit organisation, GS1,
Uh-huh.
who specialise in 2D codes, and they issue a lot of barcode numbers globally. And I was really interested in my role at GS1 in how 2D codes could be used to increase circularity and to trace material, product, packaging through supply chains. And I reached out to Phil and Brendan, who at the time had just delivered a very impressive pilot in North Wales, demonstrating the potential for a digital deposit return scheme. This is where people pay a little bit extra at checkout, and if they return their packaging and dispose of the bottle correctly, they actually can get that deposit back.
Mm.
And so it's a scheme that's being sort of considered by many European countries. And Phil and Brendan had used a 2D tag format on a bottle, and then demonstrated that there was an appetite amongst the community in North Wales to actually be rewarded for recycling their packaging correctly.
Mm.
Anyway, I had a really good conversation with them about GS1 standards, how they should consider using GS1 2D codes on these bottles that they were doing this pilot with. and they told me a bit more about their idea and what they wanted to do and achieve with Polytag. And I went home and I thought, what a great idea. And actually, I know how to build what they're talking about, and I really fancied it. So the rest is history. We're an unlikely bunch, the three of us, but we get on really well, and I think we've all brought something, useful and unique to the partnership that we've got.
There's nothing more exciting, I think, than one, taking a bit of a risk, and two, doing something that you're hugely passionate about. And I think actually there's some synergy there with why I ended up doing what I'm doing, because we talk about exciting dinner conversations. I used to work for a global, a national waste management company, and my own kids describe me as the bin man.
Yeah.
Um, and, and I gladly accepted their jokes, because let's be honest, it's not the most glamorous occupation in the world to be selling bins and selling solutions, no matter how complex those solutions are. And to then come out of that entirely and be talking about packaging sustainability was a bit scary, right? You just don't know what you're going to end
Yeah.
up doing.
You're right when you say it's not glamorous, but what I would say by reply is that, many sectors have already undergone a digital transformation, like retail in particular, where I was working in these companies. What was, I think, one of the earlier sectors to undergo digital transformation, like 10, 11, 12 years ago. But the recycling sector hasn't yet. And I
Mm.
think, that's really an exciting prospect to have joined the waste and recycling sector just as it's on the cusp of undergoing what I think will be, a significant change in how waste and recycling is managed, because we're going to be able to introduce some very cool digital technologies.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I'd just like to praise the whole of Wales, because they are very, they get
Yeah.
thick, right? They get some, they're the brunt of some jokes, which I think are very unfair. For the American listeners out there, little old Wales, being on the west side of England, over the border, they get some stick, right? But they are fantastic when it comes to the environment. They really care about what they're doing with recycling. Completely aside from single-use plastic, those guys are pioneering nappy recycling, right? They are way ahead of the game with nappy recycling.
Totally.
So we should all be looking at what Wales are doing, because they
I
are doing a
100%
fantastic job.
agree. Polytag is a very proud Welsh business, and I often say that they're a small but mighty nation, and they are doing some fantastic things in this space. Yeah.
Exactly. So if we could just explore a little bit more about the whole 2D tagging and what that means for the consumer. You talked about digital DRS. We've talked about DRS on the pod before, because it's hit a bit of an impasse in the UK. So what does that actually mean for a consumer that's going to buy a product that has a poly tag on it?
Well, we need to move into the plural immediately, because the Polytag solution is actually two tag solutions. The first tag solution that we provide to brands is a GS1 compliant QR code. And for those listeners that are familiar with GS1 standards, here we are talking about it again for the second time in only 10 minutes. But my view is that if we are going to enable circularity, everybody in the supply chain has to be able to talk the same language and exchange data, share data seamlessly. And the adoption of a standard way of tagging packaging is critical to enabling that data to flow through the supply chain. So yeah, we're a really firm believer in the GS1 standards here at Polytag, and all of the QR codes that we put onto pack for clients is GS1 compliant. They contain the barcode number of the product, and then can be used in order to access like a marketing channel. They can talk directly to consumers at barcode level, share lots of information, essentially an extension of their label. So it becomes a digital label, in effect, that we're able to deliver for clients. And within that 2D QR code, we can also embed richer information, such as the batch number of the product or the expiry date of the product, even going so far as to serializing the QR code. And in doing so, introducing the opportunity to reward consumers with loyalty points or indeed deposits, because the serialized nature of the QR code protects against fraudulent claims.
Right.
So it's a very risk-free way of delivering loyalty and reward schemes through that QR code format. The second tag format that we provide for clients is very different. It's an invisible tag solution that is applied all over the label using a fluorescent ink.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a grid of data matrix that just contain the barcode number of the product. And those are not intended for consumer interaction. Instead, those tags are intended for us with a piece of hardware that we've developed to detect within recycling centres. And so we put this piece of hardware over a plastics conveyor line, and it simply creates a dark environment inside which there are UV lights. They fluoresce the labels so that our camera system can capture the barcode number of that particular bottle and feed back to the brand dashboard every time we've seen one of their barcoded pieces of packaging. And so, yeah, those two tag formats can be used together or separately in order to unlock information about the circular economy, so where packaging is being disposed of and where it's being recycled, but can also be used to capture really rich insight that's never been seen before to support with internal ESG strategy, benchmarking, and also, we believe, to support with legislative response and reporting.
I I love hearing about it. Every time I hear about it, I just think it's so fascinating and impressive. And I mention my nephew on the podcast nearly every single time because he is fascinated by this stuff. He's always asking me about what recycling actually means, where things go, what impact he's having. His generation, he's 8 years old. He will
What a cool guy.
he would exactly. He would absolutely love to see how his bottle of pop ends up being recycled all the way through. And
Yeah.
the idea that his generation could track that on an app and actually feel like they're achieving something, and of course getting perhaps his reward for doing so, it's just fantastic. And that's why there's such great synergy between our two organizations because we all care about data but we care about utilizing that data to make a difference. So, yeah, thank you very much, Alice, for explaining that. And if anyone is interested in learning more about Polytag, Google them, search for them, and their website's fantastic. You'll learn loads about what they're doing.
Here's a quick message from our sponsor, Aura. This podcast is brought to you by Aura, bringing together leading consultancy, pioneering technology, and data-led insights to help organizations meet environmental compliance and manage sustainability every day.
Great. Alice, time for Recycling Room 101, which is the segment of the show where I put the guest on the spot to try and convince me that we should consign one or multiple opinions to the bin. But in the very interest of recycling, we want to bring it out with something new and we want to try and improve the situation, not just stick our heads in the sand and forget about it. So, Alice, you get 3 opportunities to convince me. What's your first topic?
Okay. The first topic is brands that claim their packaging is 100% recyclable should be consigned to room 101.
Okay. So, can you explain why and give some context around it?
So the thing about brands that make these kinds of claims that their packaging is 100% recyclable is that they don't actually know. I mean, it's as simple as that. There are one particular very famous soft drink brand. They manufacture 20,000 bottles a minute off their production line. And those 20,000 bottles a minute are lost in terms of what happens to the packaging as soon as they hit the distribution network. And yet brands like this very famous brand still make claims that their packaging is 100% recyclable with no proof points, no data trail, nothing. And I just think shouldn't be allowed. It's a greenwashing issue. And Polytag could resolve a lot of those challenges by giving them barcode level insight about where their packaging is actually getting recycled.
And I like to debate on the show about any conversational piece. So if we're, without naming who they are, and we both know who they are, what would be their defence if they were here now? What do you think they would say? Are they saying theoretically this is 100% recyclable? All components are recyclable.
I mean that is their defence. Yeah, they say, well, if the consumer did the right thing and put it into the recycling stream, then it would be 100% recyclable. But my challenge back is, well, you should try and do more to incentivize consumers to do the right thing and put it into the correct bin, and you should really want to know where your packaging is ending up. It's a responsibility that I think is tightening up, and more brands need to be aware of it.
Interesting. I was at the Net Zero conference in London last year, and this brand was on a panel, and it was the first panel of the entire event. And the gentleman came up onto the stage and was a protester. And he actually had 2 bottles of this company's beverage. As he explained his opinion, he poured those 2 bottles on himself as a way of bringing some visualization to the problem. So there's clearly a consumer concern about the impact of these plastics, and I think your point directly addresses that. I'd say it's confusion, right? There is a position taken by this organisation, which is this packaging is recyclable, but I'd also argue that consumers don't necessarily know what that means, and until there is data that you could provide as Polytag to prove that it is being recycled, your argument would be that it's almost greenwashing.
I think it's a misleading claim. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
So that would be my first thing to consign to Room 101, Trevor, the use of the words 100% recyclable.
And would you simply just say don't use that at all, or is there a recycled version of that? Ironically, that you would actually accept on the packaging?
Do you know what? I would probably be inclined to say no. I just don't think they should use it. And you know what? Without going into too much detail, there is a whole other issue with 100% recyclable claims, which is around the fact that there are 14 plus different fractions of plastic, and actually to recycle plastic in the way that we all understand it should be, i.e. a bottle gets made back into a bottle, is actually impossibly hard, because there are so many derivations of plastic. There's PET, there's HDPE, there's PP, there's LDPE, and there's barrier layers mixed in with stuff that you think is a pure fraction of plastic. And anyway, actually being able to recycle a bottle is still difficult, even if it has got into the recycling stream, just because of the fact that there's so many different types of plastic, and to recycle them effectively does require a lot of enhanced sortation, and many facilities are just not equipped to do that successfully at this stage.
I 100% agree with that point, actually, and I would just couch that with having worked for Biffa prior to my current role. I'm not here to promote them necessarily, but from my understanding of their investment in the PET recycling industry, they are working very, very hard to segregate PET from other plastic streams and recycle it as a single source to create rPET recycled PET as a raw material. So there is certainly effort ongoing
Definitely,
to achieve it.
definitely effort,
Yeah,
but it isn't widespread yet, and maybe you could argue not widespread enough to be able to support that 100% recyclable claim in a completely different sense of what we were talking about earlier. But yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what's topic number 2?
Topic number 2, for Room 101, would be any ESG report that mentioned a target of zero to landfill by 2030. I see that a lot. Yeah, this brand's aspiration is to send zero to landfill by 2030. And of course, it's absolutely admirable and the right direction of travel. And everybody should have that intention to send zero to landfill. I think my issue is that I don't believe that there is any data to support progress towards that achievement. That particularly, data at a granular enough level. And when we're presenting Polytag's capability, we're saying, look, start now, start collecting barcode level insight about how much of your plastic packaging is actually getting into the recycling system. And over time, you can use that as a benchmark to assess progress. And that, is not the full answer to these aspirations of zero to landfill by 2030, but it is a data point that can be used and referenced as part of your journey towards that ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel generally, brands that are making these aspirational claims, such as zero to landfill in 2030, really do need to try and get access to more data to support their progress.
Yeah, I think it's a common problem with the industry, global industry. We've seen a number of global brands in recent months slightly adapt their targets. And that's perhaps down to COVID and the immense impact that had on everyone. But it's also perhaps due to those organizations not quite understanding the challenge that they'd set themselves. And there is a potential argument, not necessarily that I'm making it, but that those organizations were trying their best to appear green without really understanding what it meant. And
Yeah.
that's certainly something that's been a topic of conversation on Trev Talks before. We need organizations to take more responsibility about their claims and their aspirations because nobody wants to fail. We all have a target to save the planet. It shouldn't be about pound notes, shillings, and pence. It should be about actually achieving the greater good. And I think that I speak to, you and I both speak to lots of companies that have individuals and perhaps teams that mean incredibly well. But my challenge to CEOs of these organizations to actually support those teams and individuals with the right level of investment, with technology solutions, with people, with training, to set accurate targets that they then can measure and achieve
Yeah.
against. And then we won't all be frustrated in 2029 when these companies say it's no longer 2030, it's going to be 2035. Is that fair?
I totally agree with you. Yeah, you're right. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are, in their own way, making a difference and having an impact, and are no doubt improving the journey towards zero to landfill by 2030, but they're not able to prove it. So to look at this another way, wouldn't it be great if we could give those people that are making a tangible difference the data to support their efforts, so
Mm-hmm.
they can say, yeah, last year we saw X tons of our bottles go through recycling centres, and this year it's improved by 20%. That would be a fantastic story, a validation point. Don't we want that as well?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. Yeah, thank you very much, Alice. Okay, so 2 down, 1 to go.
Right.
What's the
The
last?
last topic or the last phrase, I suppose, that I would perhaps encourage us to consign to Room 101 would be any brand strategy that's claiming to improve recycling rates or improve its recycling rates based on no actual data. So, actually, we can talk about Wales for a moment here. They're not a company, they're a country. But as you will have possibly seen, they ranked second in the world. I think it was last week, a report was released for their total recycling rate. And of course, we were celebrating because, second in the world, just behind Austria, I think it was. A fantastic result for a small but mighty nation on recycling results. But it was a little bit bittersweet for me because I also immediately sat there thinking, well, based on what data? And even if all of these countries that were ranked had got data to justify where they were ranked, it certainly wouldn't have been standardized. And so, very quickly you can start to pick holes in this kind of a ranking at country level. And the same 100% applies to any company or brand that is claiming to have improved recycling rates, because we all know that there is no actual data at barcode level, at granular enough level for that to be really taken as a proof point. So I think it becomes quite difficult to make claims like we've improved recycling rates at a company level or even a country level when there is so little data about actual recycling activity. That,
There's,
and you know what, like that's probably one of the biggest shocks I got right back when I joined the recycling sector. Because again, as I said, I've talked about the digital transformation that I worked through within the retail sector, 10, 12 years ago. But as a consequence, the retail sector has an enormous amount of data, you know, and to join the recycling sector that has not undergone a digital transformation, and then also realize that literally there is no data coming out of recycling centres that is granular enough to sort of inform claims and allow decisions to be made, was quite surprising. Literally, as soon as you put stuff in the bin, it becomes a black hole.
yeah,
And so we're trying to shine a light on that.
there's clearly a trend here in in your three topics, Alice, and we're both working in that space where data informs better decisions, right? That's what we are walking into businesses all over the world and having that conversation. And I would also implore organizations to consider having some data doesn't mean it's good data.
No, that's true as well.
The number of times I hear people say, well, we just need something. We need something. And I actually would strongly argue the case that having something that's wrong is worse than having nothing at all. At least if you have nothing, you can put your hands up and say, we don't have it. Making the wrong claims and making spurious claims is far, far worse because, unfortunately, in our society, money gets made out of what people say and what they suggest. And the world is not going to get saved if what we're trying to do is make more money out of it. There's a very political, ethical point in there, but hopefully people will sense that it's not a criticism. It's more of a gentle request that people think ethically and morally about the reasons why we're doing this. And I really like what you said before, Alice, about how we're all trying to achieve the right thing. We can't do it alone, right? We can't just do Polytag. Polytag's doing amazing things, but it needs to be connected with.
Yeah, we're only one small bit. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you very much for three very compelling suggestions. I think that number one, the 100% recyclable claim is the one that speaks to me loudest. Because until we have clarity and accuracy in these statements, we won't make progress. And I think that's what's holding us back. There isn't the understanding for consumers yet amongst the masses to do something about it. The protests that I talked about, they are the minority. And actually, until the majority of people understand the challenge that we're facing, we're not going to motivate change. So for me, Alice, I'm really pleased to say that we're going to consign the phrase 100% recyclable to Recycling Room 101. And let's lay down a gauntlet, right? Let's say to these organizations, stop making claims until you've got the data
Yes.
and prove it. And I think hopefully everyone will go away from listening to this and think, how can I use Polytag to inform and educate not just the consumer, but us as a business? Because then we'll
Agreed.
start to turn those cogs, right? And we'll get that progress.
Yeah, I mean, my two most overused phrases are stop guessing and start knowing.
I
And
like that.
what gets measured gets managed. I mean, which we're all obviously familiar with. But yeah, I think it's high time we moved from guessing and making up averages to actually getting some factual raw data out of the recycling centres to really inform strategy and help people move forward with purpose.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. You use the word stop using, or the phrase stop using averages in there, and that's probably the most used phrase within Aura. Um, I've worked in this industry now for, 24 years, and I'm personally sick and tired of people saying, I've got something, I think it's about right, but we use averages. And there's no business in the world that would say that about their sales figures. So
Exactly.
can we stop using it for when it comes to the environment and start doing something about it? Alice, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful hearing about Polytag and about your passion. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the listeners before we finish?
Well, I think you've given us a great plug-in opportunity, but I will just finish by saying that we are not the full answer at Polytag, but we are wholeheartedly committed to helping people collaborate to enable the circular economy. And so you can be assured that if you give me a ring, drop me a note, we'll have a really good chat together. And I really do hope that we can see the adoption of the Polytag solution more widely, because I do believe that we can make a big difference when it comes to managing single-use plastics.
Thanks, Alice. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Trevor. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Trev Talks. If you'd like to be featured, or you've got a question you'd like us to discuss in the next Trev Talks episode, simply drop me an email using the email address in our show notes. Trev Talks is brought to you by Aura. Aura brings together sustainable packaging consultancy, pioneering technology, and expert-led insights to positively impact your business and our planet. Find out more about how Aura is helping leading businesses to achieve their sustainability objectives